that gets to my favorite building. The first time I realized that architecture could be more than just planes and roofs and maybe what we call modern was when I saw the Philharmonie in Berlin by Hans Scharoun. And I don't know whether you've seen that, but it is a set of really dynamic concert halls, I think 3 of them, compiled as the most kind of sculptural form. And then the facade or roof facade is just a kind of a copper cladded skin that drapes over. And that was maybe the first time that I realized that it was some interesting relationship between the performance of sound and acoustics versus the architecture, and then the pressure of the inner space on the outer skin could have some alien relationship. He himself called it his ugliest building, and I think it is one of the most spectacular buildings because it is not about aesthetics or style, but it really is about invention and innovation. And I think it is just one of the most absolutely stunning buildings. I graduated in Holland in 1990 and then realized that what I really missed in my education was architectural theory and critical thinking. And I had understood that at that point, Chumi was running Columbia. And although I was originally meant to go to the AA in London, for several reasons that did not happen, or I decided not to, and went to Columbia instead, and really focused on architectural theory. So I was in the studio of Peter Jones, Wes Jones and Peter Fau. And they had worked with Weitzman, and they did a studio on hard and soft form, and that made us read, they wanted us to figure out what Peter Weitzman meant by that. I started reading 1,000 Plateaus by Gilles Deleuze and Félix Guattari that talk about smooth and striated, which was to me the closest I could think of, because I didn't know what weak and strong form was. And that was my thesis. Peter was in the thesis review as a juror and hired me. So it was like a really weird tumble right there. But also I met Kipnis and Alan, Hani Rashid. I had the best possible time. It was an amazing time to be at Columbia. And as I said, I already made the jump to digital. This was actually almost pre-digital. When I was there, I was like 92. 1990, 92. But yeah, so 92 I went to Peter's office and then worked on the first computers, the first Macintoshes. I feel like a dinosaur talking about this, but we had little 2CIs, they're deeper than big. And we worked on Form Z, which was one of those first softwares. And Peter Weitzman sent us, the 3 project architects, he sent us to Ohio to the guy who had invented Form Z, and we got 3D classes classes in 3D design. So it was quite a funny start. And and then after Peter's office, I started my own. But being a European architect, I have from the beginning always designed everything with passive solar energy, smart systems, because, I feel like you can really not be an architect if you don't. So what is the science of architecture? I mean, actually, funny enough, archi-tectonics means the science of architecture. And I've always taken very seriously that architecture is really between science and art, and I hover towards the science side, hence the academics in my life. But I really feel strongly that research is a very important part of our profession, and that if we don't invent things, no one will. So hence the book that we'll talk later about, but it really is about how to innovate architecture from the inside out, and to perhaps think more like an industrial designer rather than as a standard architect putting little bricks on top of bricks, that is kind of how we did it in, 800. I'm from Holland, so we have buildings from 800, Middle Ages. Yeah, so I think from the beginning we always worked sustainably. We used renewable resources. We found manufacturers that use those. We try to work with local people. We prototype a lot rather than making presentation models. As I said, our presentation models are actually made by our clients, not by us. And that was also really important. I also realized, especially in the 90s, couldn't you call yourself a green architect? Because green architecture always seemed to be equated with bad architecture. And I was really interested in good architecture, whatever that is. So I was interested from the beginning, I was really interested in developing buildings that had their own character and identity. And I wasn't interested in style or following a style or following my masters, whatever that means. But I really always try to think, like, what can we change? How do we need to really rethink this? What is the future of this? How can we find interesting people that work on that? So from the beginning, I worked with a group of manufacturers that are international and that helped us develop new materials, new systems, new whatevers. And that's maybe why the book is called Strange Objects, because I think our buildings are not very kind of standard, if you call it that way. The idea of wonder and strangeness is really important in architecture, and for a long time was actually very important, right, in the old times of the Gothic and the Baroque and whatever, but has been like really diminishing over the last century, really. So the buildings we develop from these maybe strange innovations or inventions that we study, so that they kind of have their own natural logic, and maybe the beauty grows out of the research and the innovation rather than preconceived idea. So I like to think that the design grows rather than is really implemented by us. You know, when I started as an architect, I realized there's two ways to start as an architect. One, you take all the work you can and you probably make more money, but you make things that other people want you to make. Or you kind of put a little resistance up yourself and you work more on research and communicating that research, and maybe you teach a bit more in the beginning so that you're independent, and then you work on projects you really like to work on, and then hopefully build up the portfolio that then will attract the clients that are also interested in this. And I obviously chose the last part because we don't work very much for standard big developers at all, just because I think some Europeans are interesting, but I think the American developers for now, I think, just have other interests than we do. And some of them don't. I mean, we definitely work with some really interesting developers, but they're very special, you know, there are not many. But yeah, we like to work with people that are interested in developing things in other ways.